My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm 65 years old, and 3 weeks after my husband's funeral, my own children tried to kick me out of my home. They told me to start packing, that they'd found a buyer for the house my husband and I had built our lives in for 40 years. They had no idea I was about to pack a suitcase for a one-way trip to a secret Italian villa they never knew existed. Before I tell you how it all happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and let me know what country you're in and what time it is there. It's comforting to know we're all connected, no matter the distance. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks to the day we buried my Thomas. I was standing in the kitchen, the one he'd redesigned for me on our 30th anniversary, watching steam rise from a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. The grief was a physical weight, a thick blanket that muffled the sounds of the world and made everything feel distant and unreal. The ceramic mug, a Father's Day gift to Thomas from our daughter Claire years ago, felt foreign in my hands. Everything felt foreign without him. The phone buzzed against the granite countertop, its vibrations startlingly loud in the quiet house. It was Richard, my son. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice brisk, devoid of the gentle warmth he reserved for business calls. This was his getting things done voice. "Good morning, sweetheart," I managed, my own voice sounding thin, like a radio signal from far away. "Listen, I don't want to upset you, but Claire and I have been talking. Amanda agrees. This situation, it's not sustainable." I stared out the window at the rose bushes Thomas had so lovingly tended. They were starting to look neglected. "What situation, Richard?" "The house, Mom. It's too big for you. The mortgage, the upkeep, the taxes. Dad's pension is modest. We're worried you're going to be under serious financial strain." The mortgage. The word hung in the air. I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Thomas, my meticulous Thomas, had made the final mortgage payment 5 years ago. We'd celebrated with a bottle of champagne, sitting right at this kitchen table. We decided not to tell the children. "Let them think we still have debts," he'd said with a wink. "It builds character, stops them from seeing us as their personal bank." At the time, I'd thought it was a bit cynical. Now, a cold understanding began to dawn. "I see," I said, keeping my voice even. "So, we've come up with a solution," he continued, oblivious. "Amanda's cousin, Gary in real estate, he's already found a potential buyer. A young family, cash offer, quick closing. It's perfect. It would take all this pressure off you." Pressure. The only pressure I felt was the crushing weight of loss, and now the chilling pressure of my own son trying to dismantle my life as if it were a failing business. "And where would I go?" I asked, my grip tightening on the mug. "That's the best part. Claire's got that finished basement. It's got its own bathroom. We could put in a little kitchenette. You'd have your own space, and you could help her out with Sophia. You know how much Sophia loves having you around. It's a win-win." A win-win. I would lose my home, my independence, my sanctuary of memories, and be relegated to a basement, a built-in babysitter for my daughter. They would get to liquidate my largest asset and absolve themselves of any real responsibility for my well-being. The roses outside blurred as tears pricked my eyes. This wasn't concern. This was an eviction notice wrapped in the language of love. "I need to think about it, Richard," I whispered. "There's not much to think about, Mom," he said, his voice hardening with impatience. "Gary's clients are serious. They want to move by the end of next month. Just start packing up the important things. We can help you sort through the rest." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, the silence of the house screaming at me. They had discussed my future, my finances, my home, and had made a decision without asking me a single question. They had assumed my vulnerability, assumed my ignorance, assumed my weakness, and in their assumption, they had revealed their own character. That night, sleep was impossible. The house groaned around me, each creak and settle a memory of Thomas. I thought of his words, "Don't ever trust anyone talking about money without the paperwork." Around 2 a.m., I got out of bed, put on my robe, and walked downstairs to his study. The room still smelled of him. Old books, leather, and the faint, clean scent of his aftershave. I sat in his worn leather chair, my hands tracing the smooth wood of the desk where he'd balanced our checkbook for 40 years. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Confirmation, perhaps? I opened the bottom right drawer, the one he kept all the important household files in. Underneath old tax returns and appliance warranties, I found a large manila envelope labeled House. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, right on top, was the deed to our home, and stapled to it was the final letter from the bank dated 5 years prior, congratulating Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Wilson on the successful completion of their mortgage. A large authoritative stamp in red ink declared it. Paid in full. I clutched the paper to my chest. This wasn't just a document. This was the first piece of solid ground I'd felt under my feet in 3 weeks. This was the first weapon in a battle I didn't know I needed to fight. My children had made a grave miscalculation. They had assumed I was a poor, grieving widow. They had forgotten who I was, Thomas Wilson's wife, and I was not going down without a fight. The next morning, armed with the knowledge of the paid-off mortgage, a strange calm settled over me. The grief was still there, a constant dull ache in my chest, but now it was accompanied by something else, a cold, clear sense of purpose. My children saw me as a problem to be managed. It was time to show them how capable I was of managing my own affairs. I decided not to confront them, not yet. A direct attack would only put them on the defensive. Instead, I would play the part they had assigned me. The befuddled, grieving mother, overwhelmed by the complexities of the world. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of their greed. I called Richard first, pitching my voice to sound frail and uncertain. "Richard, honey, it's Mom. I was thinking about what you said, and you're right. It's all so overwhelming." I could almost hear the satisfied smile in his voice. "I know, Mom. It's a lot to handle. We just want what's best for you." "I know, dear. I was just wondering, this family that wants to buy the house, have they made an actual offer? Your father always told me to be careful with these things. I'm just so afraid of being taken advantage of." "Don't you worry about anything," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Gary's handling it. They've offered $350,000. It's a very fair price in this market, especially for a quick cash sale. We'd be foolish not to take it."
$350,000? I did a quick mental calculation. After imaginary closing costs, that would be a tidy sum for him and his sister to split. I wrote the number down on a notepad next to the phone. "Oh, that does sound like a lot of money," I said, feigning relief. "That would certainly help with, well, with everything." Next, I called Claire. She answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Mom, I'm so glad you called. I was just telling Sophia how wonderful it will be to have Grandma living with us." "That's sweet of you, honey," I said, forcing a warmth I didn't feel. "I'm just worried about being a burden. And that basement, does it get much light?" "Oh, we'll fix it up to be so cozy. We can use some of the money from the house sale to put in new lighting, maybe even a bigger window. Think of it as an investment in your comfort." An investment. They would use my money to renovate their home, to make my gilded cage more palatable. That's thoughtful of you, Claire. And it would be lovely to spend more time with Sophia. How is she doing with her first year of college? It must be so expensive. This was the real reason for my call. "Oh, it's a fortune," Claire sighed dramatically. "The tuition alone is a killer, not to mention her sorority fees and books. But we make it work. We do anything for her education. That's why this house sale is such a blessing. It will give us some breathing room with her college fund." My hand tightened around my pen. For the past 2 years, since Sophia had started at university, I had been quietly transferring $500 into her account on the first of every month. It was my gift to her, money from my own savings that I'd earmarked for my granddaughter. Thomas and I had agreed it was important to help, and I'd continued the tradition after he passed. Claire knew about it, of course. She had given me the account details. But listening to her now, taking full credit for covering all the expenses, a venomous suspicion began to curdle in my gut. "Well, you're a wonderful mother for making such sacrifices," I said, my voice dangerously smooth. "I'm so proud of you. We do what we have to do," she said, basking in the unearned praise. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of the kitchen staring at the notepad. On it were two key pieces of information: the supposed sale price of my home and the lie about Sophia's college fund. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than I could have imagined. My children weren't just misguided or impatient. They were actively deceiving me and each other to get their hands on money they believed was theirs for the taking. They saw me as a grieving woman, isolated and vulnerable. They had forgotten that I was the one who had managed the household budget for 40 years, stretching every dollar Thomas earned to give them music lessons, summer camps, and university educations. I was the one who had nursed them through chickenpox and heartbreak. I had seen through every little lie they told as teenagers, and I could certainly see through this one. My resolve hardened. This was no longer just about keeping my house. It was about respect. It was about the truth. And it was about reclaiming my own dignity from the children I had raised, who now looked at me and saw only a dollar sign. I picked up the phone again, but this time I wasn't calling my children. I was calling Vivian Martinez, the estate lawyer Thomas had trusted for over 20 years. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to get my own team on the field. The law office of Martinez and Associates was in a restored brick building downtown. It smelled of old paper, leather, and a quiet, unshakable authority. It was the kind of place that made you instinctively straighten your posture. I walked in not as a victim seeking rescue, but as a client seeking counsel, and that distinction made all the difference. Vivian Martinez was a sharp, elegant woman in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a sleek bun, and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of genuine sympathy. "Eleanor, I am so deeply sorry for your loss," she said, leading me into a conference room with a large mahogany table. "Thomas was a wonderful man, a truly wonderful man. Thank you, Vivian. He always spoke so highly of you." "The feeling was mutual," she said, her expression turning serious. "He was also one of the most prudent and forward-thinking clients I've ever had, which, I suspect, is why you're here." I took a deep breath and laid my cards on the table. I told her about the phone calls from Richard and Claire. I told her about their plan to sell my house, move me into a basement, and their assumptions about my financial state. Then, I slid the paid in full document across the polished table. "This is the first thing I found," I said. "I believe my children are operating under a series of profound and perhaps convenient misconceptions." She picked up the document, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. "Eleanor, you have no idea." She opened a thick file on the table in front of her. It was labeled Wilson, Thomas, and Eleanor. Thomas was very specific in his final years. He saw this coming. "He did?" The words came out as a whisper. "Thomas loved his children," Vivian said gently, "but he wasn't blind to their natures. About 3 years ago, after Richard approached him to co-sign on that disastrous restaurant venture, Thomas came to my office. He said, 'Vivian, I need to protect Eleanor. Our children have come to see her love as a resource, and I worry they'll see my death as an opportunity.' We spent the next month restructuring everything." She turned a page in the file. "First, the house. The deed is, and has been for 3 years, solely in your name. They were removed from it. They legally have no say in what happens to this property. Any agreement their real estate cousin has made is completely void. No sale can proceed without your signature, period. A wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy washed over me. It was real. I wasn't just emotionally right, I was legally right. "But that's just the beginning," she said, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. "Thomas didn't just leave you a pension, he set up a series of trusts and investments that you are the sole beneficiary of. The children were named as beneficiaries only on a small life insurance policy, enough to show his affection, but not enough to change their lives. He wanted them to make their own way." She turned a portfolio summary across the table. The numbers on the page made my head spin. They weren't fabulously wealthy, but we were more than secure. We were comfortable, with an income from dividends that was more than double my husband's pension. The story my children had constructed about the poor, struggling widow was a complete fabrication. "He was very clear," he said. "He told me Eleanor sacrificed her own dreams for this family. The rest of her life is for her to live out her own dreams, not to finance theirs."
Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude, of overwhelming love for the man who had known me so well, who had sought to protect me even from beyond the grave. "There's more," Vivian said, her voice softening. She retrieved a small, ornate brass key from the file. "Thomas rented a safe deposit box at the downtown branch of your bank. He instructed me to give you the key, and only you, a month after his passing. That was yesterday." She pushed the key across the table. It felt heavy in my palm, a solid piece of a puzzle I was only just beginning to understand. "He wouldn't tell me what was in it," Vivian confessed. "He just smiled that quiet smile of his and said, 'It's a surprise for Eleanor's next chapter.' Eleanor, whatever is in that box, it was meant for you and you alone. Thomas trusted you to know what to do with it." I left the law office an hour later, my purse heavy with documents and my mind buzzing with newfound power. My children thought they were playing checkers with a pawn. They had no idea I was sitting at a chessboard and my loving husband had just handed me my queen. The game was about to change. The next morning, I drove to the downtown branch of the First National Bank. The building was old and imposing, with marble floors that echoed with the hushed sounds of commerce. I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation as I presented the brass key and my identification to the bank officer. He led me through a heavy steel door into the vault, a sterile, silent room lined with hundreds of small, anonymous metal boxes. The officer used his key, then mine, and pulled out a long, surprisingly heavy box, placing it on a small table in a private viewing room before leaving me alone. For a moment, I just stared at it. Box 72B, a number that held the last secret my husband had kept for me. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no jewelry, no stacks of cash. Instead, there were two items. The first was a thick, leather-bound folder. The second was a simple, cream-colored envelope with my name, Eleanor, written on the front in Thomas's familiar, steady script. I picked up the letter first. My heart ached just seeing his handwriting. I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and you are beginning your next chapter. I know your heart is heavy, my love, and I am so sorry to be the cause of your pain. I hope that what you find in this box will in time bring you not more sorrow, but a new kind of joy. I have watched you for 40 years pour your heart and soul into our family. You put your own ambitions aside to raise two wonderful, if sometimes misguided, children. You managed our home with the grace and wisdom that I admired every single day. You were the architect of our happiness, and I was merely the fortunate man who got to live in the beautiful home you built. But now, my love, it is time to build a home just for you. A place not for sacrifice, but for sunshine. Not for obligation, but for inspiration."
The folder in this box contains the deed and documents for a small property I purchased last year. It is a little villa in Sorrento, Italy, overlooking the sea. I was going to surprise you with it on your 65th birthday. I imagined us growing old there, drinking wine on the terrace, watching the sunset, with no one to answer to but the tides. I am so sorry I cannot be there to share it with you. Go there, Eleanor. Go there for a week or a year or for the rest of your life. It is paid for. It is yours. There is also a bank card in the folder. I opened a separate account and have been funding it for the past year. I called it your Independence Fund. There is $50,000 in it. Use it for plane tickets, for new furniture, for foolish, wonderful adventures. Use it to be free. Don't let anyone, not even our children, whom we love, convince you that your life is over. It is just beginning again. You gave us a lifetime. Now please, take one for yourself. With all my love, for all of time. Thomas. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the crisp paper. They were tears of profound loss, but also of a fierce, resurgent love. He had known. He had seen my fatigue, my quiet sacrifices, and he had not taken them for granted. He had prepared an escape for me, a future I hadn't even dared to dream of for myself. Shaking hands, I opened the leather folder. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd described. There was a thick packet of documents with Italian header letter filled with words I didn't understand, but whose meaning was clear. There were glossy photographs of a charming whitewashed villa with bright blue shutters, a stone terrace wrapped around it covered in blooming bougainvillea with a view of the sparkling Mediterranean Sea that stole my breath away. There was a set of keys and a debit card with a small piece of paper noting the PIN. I spread the photos across the small table. Villa Alba, the white villa. It looked like something from a postcard, a dream of a life I'd never imagined. And it was mine. This inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was a testament. It was a final, loving command from my husband to save myself. I sat in that cold, quiet room for nearly an hour, just holding the letter and looking at the pictures. Richard's voice echoed in my head, talking about a dark basement. Claire's voice talking about my comfort. They saw my future as a slow, managed decline in the service of their own lives. My husband, my Thomas, had seen it as a vibrant, sun-drenched new beginning. I carefully packed everything back into the box. As I walked out of the vault and back into the light of the main bank lobby, I was no longer just Eleanor Wilson, grieving widow. I was Eleanor Wilson, owner of Villa Alba and the master of my own fate, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. My first instinct, after leaving the bank, was to call my children and unleash a torrent of righteous anger. I wanted to scream at them for their disrespect, their greed, their stunning betrayal. But I held back. A fiery confrontation would be satisfying for a moment, but it wouldn't achieve my ultimate goal. I didn't just want to win. I wanted them to understand the magnitude of their misjudgment. I needed to dismantle their narrative of my helplessness piece by piece until they were left with nothing but the uncomfortable truth of their own character. And the first piece to dismantle was the lie about Sophia. My granddaughter was a sweet girl, a bright student with a good heart, but she was young, and she trusted her mother. Claire had been weaving a web of manipulation around her, painting herself as the struggling, sacrificial parent and me as the needy, fragile grandmother. It was a narrative designed to isolate me, to ensure that if I ever did complain, Sophia would see it as the ramblings of a saddled woman. I needed to cut through that web with a blade of undeniable fact.
That evening, I sat down at my computer. I opened my online banking portal and navigated to the bill pay section. For 2 years, I had a recurring payment set up, $500 to the account number Claire had provided for Sophia, with the memo, "For your college fund." I looked at it for a long moment, then deleted the recurring payment. This month's payment would be different. I initiated a new one-time transfer of $500 directly from my own checking account. But instead of the usual memo, I did something different. Most banks, when you transfer money, send an automatic email notification to the recipient if you provide their email address. I typed in Sophia's university email address, which I had from our correspondence. Then, in the optional message field, I wrote a simple, clear sentence. "Hi, sweetheart. Here is your monthly allowance for March. So proud of all your hard work. Love, Grandma." I clicked send. There was no going back. It was a small, digital stone dropped into a still pond. I had a feeling the ripples would be significant. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sophia's name. I took a deep breath and answered, keeping my voice warm and steady. "Grandma?" Her voice was hesitant, laced with confusion. "Hello, my dear. Is everything all right?" I think so. I just got a weird email from the bank. It said you sent me $500. "Oh, good. It went through," I said cheerfully. "That's your allowance for the month. I was a little worried with the new system." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her young mind, comparing this new piece of information with the story she had always been told. "Grandma," she said finally, her voice much smaller now, What do you mean, monthly allowance?" "Well, that's what it is, isn't it? I've been sending it to you on the first of every month since you started college, to help with your expenses, books, sorority dues, all those things. Has there been a problem? You've been getting it, haven't you?" Silence. A deep, profound silence that stretched for what felt like a full minute. In that silence, I knew a foundational belief in her world was cracking. "Grandma?" she whispered, and her voice was thick with emotion. I thought that money was from Mom. She told me she was working extra shifts to help me out. She said it was her money." I closed my eyes, a sharp pain lancing through my heart. It was worse than I thought. Claire hadn't just taken the money. She had used it to build a monument to her own supposed sacrifice, a monument built on my generosity and her daughter's ignorance. "Oh, honey," I said, and the sadness in my voice was real. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted to help. Your grandfather and I, we always wanted to make sure you had everything you needed for your education." "You mean Grandpa knew about this too?" "Of course, dear. It was our idea together." I could hear a choked sob on the other end of the line. "She lied to me," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "For 2 years, she's been lying to me." I let her process it. I didn't add a single word of condemnation against her mother. I didn't need to. The facts were doing the work for me. "Sophia," I said gently, "there's more to this story. A lot more. And I think you deserve to know the truth. But it's not a conversation for the phone. Whenever you're ready to hear it, all of it, you just let me know." "I'm ready now," she said, her voice suddenly fierce, the confusion replaced with a nascent anger. "Tell me everything, Grandma. Tell me what they're doing." The first thread in their web had been cut, and it was my granddaughter who was holding the scissors. The next evening, Sophia and I arranged a video call. Seeing her face on the screen, her young features tight with anger and hurt, made my heart ache. She looked like she hadn't slept. She told me she had confronted her mother the night before, and she recounted the conversation with a kind of raw, disbelieving horror. I went right into the living room where she was watching TV. I just held up my phone with the email from you, and I asked her, "What is this?" According to Sophia, Claire first tried to play dumb. "What's what, honey? Just another email scam, probably. Delete it." "It's not a scam, Mom. It's a bank notification from Grandma. She's been sending me $500 every single month. Not you. Her." At that, Claire's mask of casual indifference had slipped.
Her face had paled. She'd tried to recover, shifting from denial to damage control. "Okay, look," she had said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. "It's not what you think. I asked your grandmother to help out a little, and she offered. I was managing the money for you to make sure it went to the right things. I didn't want to burden you with financial details." "Burden me?" Sophia had shot back, her voice rising. "You let me think you were working yourself to the bone for me? You made me feel guilty for every little thing I asked for? You told me we couldn't afford for me to go on the spring break trip with my friends because of my tuition. Was that a lie too?" This is when the manipulation had escalated. Claire, seeing she was losing control, had switched tactics. She tried to paint me, her own mother, as the source of the problem. "You have to understand, Sophia," Claire had said, her eyes welling with crocodile tears. "Grandma, she's not herself right now. She's grieving. She gets confused. She's very fragile. I was trying to protect you from her and protect her from getting too involved. It's not healthy for her to think she's financially responsible for you. It creates a codependency." Listening to Sophia recount this, my blood ran cold. The audacity of it, the cold-blooded calculation was breathtaking. She was trying to gaslight her own daughter, framing my generosity as a symptom of senility and her own deception as an act of compassionate caregiving. "And what about the house?" Sophia had pressed, refusing to be sidetracked. "Your Uncle Richard told me you guys have to sell Grandma's house because she's broke. Is that a lie too? Is any of it real?" This question had apparently hit a nerve. Claire's face had hardened. "That is none of your business," she had snapped. "That is a grown-up decision to help your grandmother out of a very difficult situation. She can't afford that house. She needs to be somewhere we can look after her. You are a child and you don't understand these things. Frankly, your grandmother has been filling your head with nonsense. I think it's best if you don't speak to her for a while. It's clearly upsetting her and confusing you." It's a classic narcissist gambit. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She was trying to isolate Sophia from me, to cut off her access to the truth.
"That was it, Grandma," Sophia said to me through the screen, her eyes flashing with a steely resolve I'd never seen in her before. "That's when I knew. It wasn't about protecting me or you, it was about controlling the story. It was about money. And it was all lies." She had ended the conversation by walking out of the room, leaving her mother sputtering in the living room. She'd gone straight to her bedroom and called me. "So now you know," I said softly, my heart swelling with a fierce pride for this young woman. She had faced down the dragon and had not flinched. "I know some of it," she corrected me. "Now I want to know the rest. Tell me their plan, the real plan." So I told her. I told her about the plan for the basement, for me to become their live-in help. I told her about the supposed house sale and Richard's impatience. I told her about my visit to the lawyer and that the house was mine and mine alone. I didn't tell her about the villa or the full extent of the investments yet. That was my ace, and I wasn't ready to play it, even with her. I needed her to ally with me based on the injustice of the situation, not the promise of a reward. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked me straight in the eye through the camera. "They are not going to get away with this," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "What are we going to do, Grandma?" The word "we" was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I was no longer alone in this fight. I had an ally, one who had just discovered her own strength. "I have a plan, sweetheart," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "and it begins with a family dinner." With Sophia now firmly on my side, my plan began to take its final shape. It would not be a screaming match or a messy legal battle. It would be a quiet, elegant, and utterly devastating checkmate. The stage for this final act would be the very house they were so eager to take from me. I called Richard the next day. This time, my voice was different. I let it sound weary, defeated, the voice of a woman who had fought her last fight and lost. "Richard,"
I began, letting out a long, theatrical sigh. "I've been thinking, maybe you and Claire are right." He heard a sharp intake of breath on his end. He was trying to contain his excitement. "Mom, I know it's hard, but I promise it's for the best. You'll be so much happier without all this worry." "I suppose," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But the house, 40 years, Richard. Your father and I. All our memories are here." I let my voice crack. Just a little. "I have one last thing to ask. Before we sign any papers, before we call the movers, can we have one last family dinner here this Saturday night? All of us, you and Amanda, Claire and her husband and Sophia, a proper goodbye to the house." This was the bait, a sentimental request from a capitulating mother. It was exactly what he would expect, and it would appeal to his sense of magnanimity in victory. "Of course, Mom," he said, his voice magnanimous now. "That's a wonderful idea. A final celebration. We'll be there. I'll let Claire know." "Thank you, son," I murmured, and hung up before he could hear the steel underneath the velvet. The moment the call ended, my entire demeanor shifted. The defeated widow vanished, replaced by a 5-star general on the eve of a major offensive. My first call was to a high-end international moving and storage company. "Good morning," I said, my voice crisp and clear. "I need to arrange a special delivery for this Saturday evening, precisely at 7:30 p.m. I gave them my address. "I will have a number of boxes packed and labeled for 2 separate destinations. I will need your men to be discreet, professional, and to follow my instructions to the letter." I paid for the premium service with my own credit card, the one my children knew nothing about. My second call was to an airline. "Hello, I'd like to book a one-way ticket," I said, looking at the photos of Villa Alba spread out on my desk, "to Naples, Italy, for this coming Sunday evening." As I read off my credit card number, a genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. The purchase felt less like a transaction, more like a liberation. The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet, methodical preparation. I went through the house room by room, not with the sorrow of a woman leaving her home, but with the precision of an archivist. I went into the closets in Richard's and Claire's old bedrooms. I pulled out boxes of their childhood treasures, things I had carefully saved for decades. For Richard, I packed his old baseball trophies, his high school Letterman jacket, his collection of model cars, and a box of his report cards. I paused, looking at the mostly average grades, a testament to a potential he never quite lived up to. For Claire, I packed her collection of porcelain dolls, her diaries from middle school filled with melodramatic entries, her abandoned ballet slippers, and the antique silver music box my own mother had given me, which Claire had begged for and then promptly forgotten in a drawer. I packed these things not with anger, but with a strange sense of detachment. These were relics of a past that no longer felt connected to the present. They were the childhoods of 2 people I no longer recognized. I labeled each box carefully with their names and addresses. On Saturday morning, I called Sophia. "The dinner is tonight at 6, sweetheart," I told her. "I need you to be strong. No matter what happens, you follow my lead. Can you do that?" "I can, Grandma," Sophia said, her voice steady. "What's going to happen?" "We're having a family reunion, and everyone is going to get exactly what they deserve." As evening approached, I set the dining room table with my best china, the one we only use for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I cooked Thomas's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary and potatoes. The house filled with the comforting aroma of home and tradition. It was the perfect stage. Everything was in place. The actors were about to arrive, and they had no idea the script had been completely rewritten. They arrived precisely at 6, a conquering army returning to survey its captured territory. Richard and Amanda came first, carrying a bottle of overpriced wine as a token of their victory. Richard had on his serious business blazer, a look of strained solemnity on his face that was meant to pass for empathy. Claire and her husband, Bill, followed, with Sophia trailing behind them. My granddaughter's face was a pale, neutral mask, but her eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a fierce, secret understanding. "Mom, the house smells wonderful," Claire chirped, giving me an airy kiss on the cheek that didn't land. "It's so nice of you to do all this," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "A final memory in our family home."
The dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression and false sentimentality. Richard talked loudly about the booming real estate market. Amanda chattered about renovation ideas for their new house, the one my money would help them buy. Claire kept sighing and patting my hand, telling me how brave I was being. I just smiled, refilled their wine glasses, and played my part. The gracious, defeated matriarch. Sophia was silent, pushing food around her plate. She watched them, her parents, her aunt and uncle, with the unnerving stillness of a judge observing the accused. They were so wrapped up in their performance, they didn't even notice. At exactly 7:30 p.m., as I was clearing the plates, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, setting the plates down. Richard looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Are you expecting someone, Mom?" "In a way," I said, and walked to the front door. I opened it to find two uniformed movers standing on my porch. They were holding clipboards. "Mrs. Eleanor Wilson?" the lead mover asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied, in a clear voice, loud enough for everyone in the dining room to hear. "You're right on time. Please, come in. The boxes are in the hallway." I stepped aside, and the two men began carrying in the carefully labeled boxes from the hall and placing them in the center of the living room. From the dining room, there was a stunned silence. Then the scraping of a chair. Claire appeared in the doorway, his face a thundercloud of confusion. "Mom, what the hell is this? Who are these men?" "They're movers, dear. I've hired them to deliver some things." "Deliver what?" he sputtered, his eyes falling on the boxes labeled with his name. "These are my things, my old trophies. Why are you packing up my stuff?" "I thought you'd want them," I said, my voice dripping with faux innocence. "Since I won't have room for them anymore. Memories are so precious, don't you think?" Claire and Amanda were now standing behind him, their faces masks of bewilderment. "All right, that's enough games, Mom," Richard said, taking a step toward me. "What is going on?" I turned from the movers and faced my family. The moment had come. "Please, everyone, have a seat in the living room. There's something we all need to discuss." They followed me, their earlier confidence evaporating, replaced with a wary suspicion. They sat stiffly on the sofas, a tribunal of fools about to be judged. The movers, having placed the last box, stood discreetly by the door, waiting for my signal. I remained standing. "Richard, you were so worried about my financial situation. You were concerned I couldn't afford the mortgage on this house." "Well, yes, Mom, That's interesting, because your father paid off the mortgage on this house 5 years ago. I have the papers in my study, if you'd like to see them." The color drained from Richard's face. Amanda's mouth fell open. Claire just stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "And Claire," I continued, turning to my daughter, "you were so concerned about Sophia's college fund. You told me you were making such sacrifices to pay for her tuition." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I wonder how you explained the $500 that has been deposited into her account from my account every month for the past 2 years. Claire flinched as if I had slapped her. She looked at Sophia,
whose face was now carved from stone. That's not true," she stammered. "Oh, but it is," I said, my voice like ice. "The bank records are quite clear, a fact Sophia is now well aware of." The room was utterly silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock they had already been arguing over who would get. "You have lied to me," I said, my voice low and shaking with a controlled fury. "You have conspired behind my back. You have treated me not as your mother, but as an inconvenience to be managed and an asset to be liquidated. You stood in my home, a home built on love and sacrifice, and you plotted to put me in a basement so you could carve up my life for your own selfish gain." I picked up the folder of real estate documents Richard had brought, the ones he expected me to sign. I held them up. "You wanted to sell my house? This house is not for sale." I let the papers drop from my fingers, scattering on the floor. "You wanted me to pack my bags?" I looked at the boxes. "I have. I've packed your memories for you. The moving company will be delivering them to your respective doorsteps tonight. I hope you find room for them." I then turned to the lead mover. "You have the addresses. You may proceed." The men nodded and began moving the boxes out. "Mom, wait," Richard pleaded, scrambling to his feet. "You can't do this. We can talk about this." There is nothing left to talk about. And then the final, beautiful blow. Sophia stood up. She walked past her parents, past her shocked uncle, and came to stand by my side. She slipped her arm through mine. She looked directly at her mother, her voice clear and unwavering. "And I'm going with her." The look of utter devastation on Claire's face was more satisfying than any amount of screaming could have ever been. It was the look of a manipulator who had just been outmaneuvered, of a puppeteer who had just had all her strings cut. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text alert. The taxi I had ordered was waiting at the end of the driveway. "Where are you going?" Claire whispered, her voice cracking. I looked at the two children I had raised, their faces pale with shock and dawning horror. For the first time, they looked truly lost. "I'm going to live the rest of my life," I said, "somewhere you can't find me." And with Sophia's arm linked firmly in mine, I turned my back on them and walked out the front door, leaving them in a house full of ghosts, with nothing but the scattered remnants of their own greed at their feet. The flight to Naples was like surfacing from a deep, murky dive into clean, fresh air. Sophia and I barely spoke. We didn't need to. We sat side by side, a silent pact of solidarity passing between us. As the plane descended over the glittering Bay of Naples, I saw the exhaustion on her young face finally give way to a flicker of wonder. She was 20 years old and had just made a decision that would alter the course of her life, all out of love and loyalty for her grandmother. A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over me. I would not let her regret this. A car I had prearranged was waiting for us. The drive to Sorrento was breathtaking, a winding coastal road carved into cliffs that plunged into an impossibly blue sea. The air that rushed through the open windows smelled of salt, lemons, and blooming jasmine. It was the scent of freedom.
When we finally pulled up to Villa Alba, it was even more beautiful than the photographs. It wasn't a mansion, but a perfectly proportioned, whitewashed home with sea blue shutters, nestled in a garden overflowing with bougainvillea and fragrant lemon trees.
As we got out of the car, a woman came bustling out of the house next door. She was compact and energetic, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and a smile that seemed to radiate genuine warmth. "Signora Wilson?" she called out, her English accented and musical. "I am Maria Bianchi, your neighbor. Welcome, welcome." Before I could formally introduce myself, she had enveloped me in a hug that smelled of garlic and roses. "And you must be the granddaughter, Sophia. Russell, he showed me your picture, so beautiful." Maria had been the caretaker Thomas had secretly hired. She had been tending the garden, airing out the house, and waiting. She handed me the keys. "Your husband, he was a good man," she said, her eyes kind. "He told me, 'Maria, one day my Eleanor will come, you take care of her.' And so I will." That first evening, as the sun set over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet, Sophia and I sat on the stone terrace. Maria had insisted on leaving us a simple dinner of fresh bread, cheese, olives, and a bottle of local wine. We ate in a comfortable silence, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. "He knew, didn't he?" Sophia said softly, looking out at the endless expanse of water. "Grandpa knew you'd need this place." "I think he knew I'd need a choice," I corrected gently, "and he gave me the most beautiful one imaginable." The following weeks were a renaissance. The grief for Thomas was still present, but it was no longer a suffocating blanket. Here, under the Italian sun, it transformed into a gentle, sweet ache of loving memory. Sophia and I fell into an easy rhythm. In the mornings, we would walk into the small village, where the local baker soon knew to save me a loaf of olive bread, and the man at the fruit stand would always have the sweetest figs for Sophia. Sophia, who I had only known as a typical American college student, blossomed. She enrolled in an intensive Italian language course in the village and, to my surprise, discovered a passion for it. She started volunteering at a small local art gallery owned by one of Maria's friends, helping them with their English translations. I saw a confidence and a sense of purpose emerge in her that had been buried under the weight of her family's expectations. And I began to write. For years, I had kept journals, but they were mostly filled with household lists and family schedules. Now I bought a beautiful leather-bound notebook and a good fountain pen, and I started writing my story. I wrote about my marriage to Thomas, the joys and the quiet struggles. I wrote about motherhood, about the slow, almost imperceptible erosion of self that can happen when your identity becomes completely enmeshed with the needs of others. I wrote about the betrayal, the confrontation, and the flight to freedom. The words poured out of me, a torrent of thoughts and feelings I hadn't realized I'd been suppressing for years. It was cathartic, it was clarifying, and it was mine. We never spoke about Richard or Claire. It was an unspoken agreement. We had left that drama behind in another country, on another continent. My phone remained off, stored in a drawer. Sophia's was on, but she told me she had blocked her parents' numbers for the time being. "I'll talk to them again someday," she said one afternoon as we were weeding the small herb garden. "But not until I'm ready. Not until I'm strong enough that their words can't hurt me." I realized, watching her pinch basil leaves between her fingers, that we were both healing. She was healing from a childhood of subtle manipulation, and I was healing from a lifetime of quiet sacrifice. We weren't just a grandmother and granddaughter hiding out in Italy. We were two women from two different generations who had rescued each other. We were building a new kind of family, one based not on obligation or transaction, but on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the shared, intoxicating joy of a new beginning. 3 months passed, 3 months of sunshine, good food, and healing laughter. The lines of grief on my face softened, replaced with a healthy tan. I cut my hair shorter, a chic style that Maria's hairdresser had insisted on. I felt lighter, younger, more myself than I had in 30 years. My memoir was taking shape, no longer just a collection of memories, but a story with a purpose. Sophia was becoming fluent in Italian, her natural warmth and intelligence charming everyone she met. She was applying to transfer to a university in Florence to study art history, a passion she'd discovered at the small local art gallery. Our life at Villa Alba was peaceful, beautiful, and utterly our own. The past seemed like a distant country. One sunny afternoon, as I was sitting on the terrace writing, Sophia brought her laptop outside. She had an odd expression on her face. "Grandma," she said hesitantly, "I unblocked Mom's number last week. I thought maybe enough time had passed. She's been sending me these long rambling emails. I haven't replied." "And?" I asked, setting my pen down. "And Uncle Richard just texted her. She sent me a screenshot. I think you should see it." She turned the laptop toward me. It was a screenshot of a text message from Richard to Claire. It read, "Have you heard from Mom? Amanda left me, took the dog, said I was a heartless ghoul. The promotion I was counting on at work went to someone else. I'm in serious trouble. I need to talk to Mom. I need to know where the money is." I stared at the message, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, not even a shred of satisfaction. It was like reading a news story about a stranger in a foreign land. His problems, his choices, his consequences. They had no power over me here. "What do you want to do?" I asked Sophia. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me feels like we should just ignore it. But another part, the part that you've helped me find, feels like it needs closure." Just then, as if on cue, Sophia's phone began to ring. The screen displayed her mother's name. We looked at each other. A silent decision passed between us. Sophia answered the call and put it on speaker. "Sophia? Oh, thank God you answered." Claire's voice was frantic, desperate. "You have to help me. Your uncle is a mess. We need to find your grandmother. Did she tell you anything? About her finances? Her lawyer? There must be an inheritance, a will." I stood up and walked over to stand behind Sophia. I looked out at the blue, endless sea. Sophia took a deep breath. Her voice when she spoke was calm and clear, the voice of an adult. "Mom," she said, "Grandma is right here. She's fine. She's more than fine. She's happy."
There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What? Put her on the phone," Claire demanded. "No," Sophia said simply. "I don't think I will. She doesn't have anything to say to you, but I do." She leaned closer to the phone. "You want to know about Grandma's inheritance? Her inheritance is peace. Her inheritance is this beautiful life she has built for herself without you. You want to know where the money is? It's being spent on Italian lessons, on fresh pasta, on the electricity that keeps the lights on in this house you will never be invited to. It's being used to fund a life, not to fix a mess of your own making." "You ungrateful little—" Claire started to screech, but Sophia cut her off. "No, Mom, I'm the most grateful person you know. I'm grateful that I got to see the truth. I'm grateful I have a grandmother who showed me what real strength and love look like. And I'm grateful that I am right here and you are all the way over there." And with that, she ended the call. She turned off the phone and looked up at me, her eyes shining with tears, but also with pride. I wrapped my arms around my granddaughter. In that moment, I knew our story was complete. We had not just survived, we had thrived. The past was finally laid to rest. My name is Eleanor Wilson. I am 66 years old now. I am a writer, a resident of Sorrento, Italy, and the proudest grandmother on earth. My children wanted to give me a future in a basement. Instead, I took the one my husband left me, a future in the sun. I learned that the most valuable thing you can inherit is the courage to claim your own life. True family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up, who stands by you, and who helps you bloom. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it finds you well.